Can they see the piece to?
All right, 5 seconds. You know, say something to pull the.
Hi, Mary. Hi, I'm Lisa Wicker. I'm head distiller and president of Widow Jane Distillery in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Currently, I'm sitting in our much too quiet bar. It's something that we're still trying to get used to, that we don't have all the hustle and bustle in here that we used to have. I'm going to talk to you today in depth a little bit about our Widow Jane water, and how that piece of it sets us apart from a lot of other whiskeys. The Widow Jane brand was started 8 years ago. It was founded on source whiskey. People that have heard me speak say, there's 2 or 3 ways to start a craft distillery. One's source whiskey, one's white spirits, and I guess there's a third option is, that you can afford to not have to do either one of those until your aged product is ready. So with that source whiskey, the thing that has set it apart is the Widow Jane water. Fast forward 5 years. With the Sampson Surrey ownership, and I started 3.5 years ago. One of the things I was tasked with was moving like our flagship single barrel to a 5-barrel small batch. And the one thing that has been the continuity between the single barrel program and our 5-barrel small batch is the water and the notes that it brings forward in the whiskeys. The 10-year flagship, it's behind me here somewhere, like right here. Flagship. It is Kentucky, it's Indiana, and it's Tennessee juice. This whiskey is that we're proving with it. We're not mashing with it. New York City water is so fabulous. Quite the surprise for me when I relocated to New York, and it's so wonderful that people use it. New York's known for what it does to, in particular, pizza crust and bagels and that sort of thing. And as a surprise to me, when I first got here, I actually found a water filtration company when I was doing some water research that will send filtration units that aren't really filtration units. They're actually for people like maybe if in Arizona, you want to duplicate the water from New York City, you can do that and make your product out there and say, yeah, it's very much, New York City style pizza crust or whatever. So we mash with that. Of course, we carbon filter that before it goes into the mash. And the reason you always hear about limestone water is that it's beneficial to the mashing process. The calcium and magnesium help create some very healthy fermentations. So the surprise for me here was when I was asked to proof with this water, because when you don't chill filter, the magic number is 92 and the Widow Jane is at 91. And that, you still need to put a beautiful polished product on the shelf. This water with the magnesium and the calcium and everything will actually sometimes will trigger some flock. And so we've discovered a way to polish the whiskey, make it absolutely beautiful, and keep all the minerality from the water. So using mineral water in whiskey is, outside of the challenge of it, is the most amazing thing that I have discovered while in my time here. That when you're blending a batch of Widow Jane, there's 2 notes I'm always looking for, and outside of that, anything goes. Not unlike any single barrel program where from batch to batch is going to vary a little bit in the flavor profile, but we always know that it's Widow Jane by the dark stone fruit notes. We always know it's Widow Jane by the baking spice. The water pops those, in particular, those dark stone fruit notes. So when I'm working on a blend, and I can't quite find them. Sometimes they're there with or without the water. Other times they're not. I continue forward on it and use this water. Those notes pop out, and that's what makes Widow Jane Widow Jane. So between product that we're laying down ourselves and product that we are sourcing, that is the common denominator that goes across all of our flavor profiles. The water is we bring from 90 miles north of here in Rosendale, New York. One GPS says 85 miles, another one says 91, but I averaged them out and it came out at 90 miles north of here. The Rosendale area is where Widow Jane gets its name. It's part of the folklore there. It's part of the story with A.J. Snyder, the previous mine owner in the Century House. You can actually visit the Widow Jane mine. It's behind the Century House. There's some hiking trails, and a museum there as well, and you can go visit that. We don't bring our water out of there. It's where we get our name, but it's not where we source our water. The Widow Jane mine, we did the whole thorough thing with, hiring some water engineers, and we have it all diagrammed. And the Widow Jane mine comes in like this, and our mine backs up to it around the other side of this mountain. Our mine is under lock and key for obvious reasons. Water purity and quality of the whiskey is, of utmost importance to us. When you visit that mine, we open the door. It's so dark, your eyes have to adjust to it, and incredible experience. I never get tired of it. You go in, and of course the ceilings are dripping, and there's pools of water, but that minerality and the smell is just absolutely incredible. So as we should, we carefully manage that water. We carefully manage the extraction from the cave and the delivery of that water to Red Hook. It comes in a stainless steel tanker, not unlike dairy product or bulk spirits, and we transfer that to stainless steel tanks here and use that for proofing our barrels. We proof our White Dog here with that as well, with our barrel program, and also all of the products that go out the door here. We don't have a cask strength product. The reason for that is because if we have a cask strength product, we can't get the Widow Jane mine water in it. Don't put the Widow Jane mine water in it, we lose our signature and some of those tasting notes that don't exist without it. The water recipe, I had it broken down. You start first, you sign with this project and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I even going to approach this? And so the first thing I did was kind of, a little bit more, let's look at the science behind it. Let me see some numbers on paper so I can understand what it is I'm working with. And those mineral recipes are not unlike, very similar to well-known European mineral waters. The recipe is almost identical to one of them. And so you get that crispness, that beautiful finish, not unlike, really great white wine that, some of us prefer minerality in our white wines. And those notes, again, carry over. If I get a finish on, especially one of our older age products, a little bit dry, you would think that it would increase that. It doesn't. It actually tempers some of that tannic finish on it. I still love those tannins because they should be in older whiskeys, but I believe those tannins need to be balanced, and the mineral water actually helps do that. It helps soften them. It softens our mouthfeel. In particular, we released our vaults at 14 years, 15-year-old blend last year. The vaults in particular, it really fattened up the mouthfeel on it, the minerality in it. And so it's really beautiful and really silky, and the stringency that you would expect isn't there. And so that, needless to say, that was very received. And this year, we're getting ready to release the Vaults 15. This is a blend of 15 and 17-year-old whiskeys. Everybody, you start to hit 15 years, and the difficulty increases a little bit on the blending process because of the whiskeys being so old, that there are such remarkable jewels in those piles of bottles, and some that are a little bit over extracted. And so I have the luxury of not using those barrels. I'm using the ones that are more balanced and really beautiful, but it certainly is an old whiskey. But the mineral water brings another, again, kind of a silkiness and kind of a softness to the finish, even mid-palate, and makes those Widow Jane notes pop in it as well. The mines were created. Mines were mined for limestone. They were mined for a particular type of limestone because it was baked into a product called clinker, I believe the name is, and it's a hardening agent for cement. And it was world renowned because of its strength. And because there was a canal there, they were able to ship that all over the world. We use a lot of those images in our advertising: the Brooklyn Bridge, the base of the Statue of Liberty, the Washington Monument, the Grand Central Station. Those are all constructed with Rosendale cement from the A.J. Snyder mines. They needed to make some repairs on a famous building in Washington a couple of years ago, and it actually took a little bit more out of the mine to make those repairs. That was so beautiful, but the cost was a little bit high on it when Porter Cement came along, and Porter Cement knocked Rosendale Cement out of the park on their cost alone. It was never as beautiful, it was never as strong, but it cost a lot less. So that's where the AJ Snyder mines kind of fell into disrepair. When that happened, I shouldn't say disrepair, to not being used anymore. So when they were not used anymore, it allowed all this beautiful water to come down the hillside and literally filter itself through all this beautiful limestone. And why that's important, number one, it tastes good. Number two, if you do use it in mashing, it helps with the, you hear about Pennsylvania limestone water, you hear about Kentucky limestone water, and that's the reason why, because it makes such beautiful mash. But the absence of iron in it doesn't turn whiskey black. And that's what you're looking for, that filtration in those beautiful, hard, sweet mineral waters. And we have been, we were lucky to benefit from that as a piece of the project that I inherited, and couldn't be happier with it, because it certainly sets us apart on the Widow Jane water. Along with that, we like to say one of a kind water. You can, if people, when I'm presenting, get stuck on that, like just get a high quality European mineral water, let it go flat, take a cask strength whiskey. We don't have one, it would have to be a competitor's, and cut that cask strength whiskey with that flat mineral water versus like DI water, distilled water, or RO water, which is reverse osmosis water. Don't use another bottled water, because a lot of them are enhanced with minerals so that they taste better. So you want to be sure that you have something that's completely free of minerals in order to compare the two, but there won't be any comparison. It'll be really interesting. You may prefer the other one better, but you'll see what notes pop in the other one. And so I've had a few people follow up with me and like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I'm like, yeah, it is crazy. It's pretty amazing what will get pulled forward and pulled out of a whiskey with a matching mineral water as well. Along with our one-of-a-kind water, one-of-a-kind cooperage on some of the new juice that we're laying down. We are laying some juice down in New York. We're laying it down out of state until we can get all the expansion done here. But the barrels that we're using are out of Zach Cooperage in Athertonville, Kentucky. A long story about them being founded in an old Seagram's plant that obviously when there was a downturn in the whiskey industry, the plant went out of business and sat idle for a while. And a gentleman named Bert Simon came back and took it over, and he'd run the Brown-Forman cooperage and started a cooperage in there and was raising tens of thousands of barrels every year for one of the large whiskey companies. And they lost that contract overnight at one point. And fortunately for me, I was in somebody's phone number list, and they gave them my phone number. We had lunch, and they didn't know about the craft world, and we were able to kind of connect them there. And our thank you gift is that we have a one-of-a-kind barrel finish. We have 2 to 4-year-old air season wood, which is unheard of in this day and age in the barrel industry. And we have a one-of-a-kind toast and char on our barrels. So those flavor profiles also, we've matched up with our one-of-a-kind corn. So we've got our one-of-a-kind water, we have our one-of-a-kind corn, and our one-of-a-kind barrel. Our one-of-a-kind corn. So these projects are separate from, our source whiskey blending projects. So we're known as blenders, and we're also known as distillers. For 2 years in a row, we have the largest open pollinated heirloom corn crop for whiskey in the United States. It's an open pollinated cross between Bloody Butcher and Wapsie Valley. I frequently use the analogy about heirloom tomatoes. Now we're seeing heirloom carrots. We're seeing all the different colored carrots. Now they're going a little bit more mainstream. We're actually seeing some of those in the grocery stores. And winemaking, I like to think of it as a grape varietal. It's going to bring all kinds of different characteristics to the table than yellow dent. So when we're talking about a yellow dent whiskey, we always talk about supporting grains or the flavor grains. I was looking through an antique whiskey textbook the other day. It was over the weekend, and you know, they were talking about how important the supporting or flavor grains are, and I've preached that for a long time. Those grains, we always think, is it a high rye bourbon? Is it, you know, wheated bourbon? Because those supporting grains are so important for the flavor of that whiskey. We all love yellow dent whiskey. We all have our favorites, right? The heirloom corn is actually the flavor grain. It is something that we want to protect and enhance and not detract from. And so our supporting grains are every bit as important, but more in a flip-flop way. They need to take second stage to our baby Jane corn as well. So we are laying a lot of that down. It's absolutely delicious, and needless to say, the stuff that we're laying down here, the juice here, is all cut and proofed in the barrel with the mine water. So when everybody can come back and hang out a little bit and taste, we'll taste through some of those barrels, and it'll be fun to show off, you know, what we're doing and what the contrast is between the with and without those corns. I'm going to circle back to the water again, so now that everybody understands what our program's like. The other piece of mineral water, excuse me, sorry. The other piece with the mineral water, the working on purity. Already so pure. When we test it coming out, the it's already like good to go. You know, of ingredient labeling, we're good to go. You know, we made sure that TTP and the FDA keep hanging that over our heads. That's going to be a thing. And what we did during all of that is we didn't have any surprises on the water purity or the minerality or anything we were presented with before. But it's nice to have that, you know, it's nice to have the second eyes on everything. You know, we'll continue that program for a long time. Do I have any questions? Mary, do you have any questions at this point in time?
I will just grab for a minute and say, as you have this amazing bourbon, you also have some really cool ryes that you're doing. So we had a question about recently you've changed the rye to also a 5-barrel batch. So do you want to talk a little bit about what's magic about that 5-barrel number?
I will. I'll go through our whole product line. If there's not any more questions about the water, you should get a lot. The also sourced. They are absolutely beautiful. They are softer and sweeter than what we think a traditional would be. The flavor notes in them are pretty delicate. There's not that we don't all love, you know, some of the big bold ryes, but the flavor notes in these are not quite as green. It's not quite as grassy. It's not quite as herbaceous. It just tends to be softer and sweeter overall. We actually pull sometimes some really like very delicate floral and honey type notes in it. I discovered with the American oak this summer that a little bit of ice will actually pop some citrus, kind of some lemon lime notes in it as well. So the way we handle our ryes is we receive those ryes, and then we put staves inside the barrels. I brought some of that. I inherited this, but was acquainted with it from my winemaking background. We used a lot of adjuncts, they call them, whether it's, you know, different types of sources of wood to be able to influence the wines. And I was, you know, able to move that over to spirits. And like I said, you know, so when I inherited this project and I came in and they were already doing that, I knew what some of the downfalls were with them, and I knew what needed to be enhanced. So with the American oak, you know, we put those American oak staves in it. Sometimes some will extract further than others, and some will be a little bit light, some of them will be a little too heavy. And they were vatting, nothing wrong with vatting, but moved the idea to the 5-barrel small batch, just like we're doing with the flagship, so that I can get a little bit better balance with those barrels. They are delicious. I think sometimes when we encourage people like, no, I don't like rye, and I'll say, you know, is the, you know, can please just taste this for me. Just please taste it. And there lots of times people are like, oh my gosh, is this rye? You know, this is amazing. we don't want it to not be like rye, but we want it to be a really beautiful, very drinkable, very approachable, very wonderful cocktail base of a rye. Our Applewood is our sister product to they're both sitting here right behind me. Right here. Got all these things, all these lovely things. So the Applewood's the one with the red stripe on it. And American Oak is the green label. The Applewood is this exact same program as the American Oak, only with Applewood stapes. They come out of a barrel cooperage in Minnesota. I'd like to repatriate everything to New York. New York's full of apple orchards. So if anyone's got someone they know that harvests their trees on a regular basis, I'd love to know that. But right now we do have, we're sticking with Minnesota because the quality is so ridiculously high on them. And we do the same thing. We put them in the barrels, they, extract at different paces, and then we're able to match those barrels together rather than vat them and have one too heavy on Applewood and one too light. We're able to come up with a really balanced, consistent product that way. Applewood notes, people are always amazed. Again, the mineral water pops those fruit notes. It's crazy. People have likened it to a little bit to apple brandy, for Calvados, right? And they lend itself perfectly for, especially this time of year, for fall and winter. It's great to sip it by itself. It's a good match for hard cider. You need, if you're into a shot and a beer, you might want to try a shot of Applewood and chase it with some hard cider this time of year. Anyway, we've had good reception on it. It's been the base of a lot of cocktail programs for their fall and winter cocktails as well. Our other products we've been working on, 10 years our flagship, right? This is the one that we're known best for, and it's most widely available. We did the 14 and 15-year-olds, like I had just explained. The 15-year-old is coming out any day now. That's the 14 from last year, and we had great success with this. I don't know that there's very many bottles, if any bottles left of that at all. Here's our 15-year-old. Same sort of label, looks very similar. And those bottles should be in distribution relatively soon. And 15 to, like I said before, 15 to 17. I don't have our lucky 13. I was looking all over. It's terrible when you're at the distillery and you're out of some, out of some product. I've done a few after hours tastings and I'm out of the 13. So the Lucky 13 looks very much like this. This is our 12-year-old single barrel program that finished up last year because the whiskey all turned 13 years old. This is the best example of the water. This is the one where it's just one sourced barrel. Of course, we go through, I vet those before they're selected. And then, but adding the mine water to this sets us apart from other single barrels and certainly makes that Widow Jane profile. When somebody picks up a glass, it's like, oh, well, this was not exactly what I was expecting, but I certainly can taste that it's Widow Jane. And that's why, because we have that gorgeous water in there, popping those and enhancing those notes as well. Decadence. This was fun. This is fun. This is a partnership with Crown Maple syrup from upstate New York. For years, they sourced our barrels to finish their Crown Maple syrup in, and we reversed the project and the product. And now we have a standalone whiskey. We blend a standalone whiskey, and then we rebarrel it into the maple syrup barrels, and we end up with Decadence. It's not sticky sweet. It's a really classic example of a good bourbon blend, but that it's been finished off with just a little bit of maple syrup to enhance it, but not to mask it. So pretty proud of this project, and this was well received last spring. You know, a person that is in my work circle described it as, you know, COVID comfort food, and it certainly has been a go-to. It is easy to drink on its own for those of us that don't like to mix cocktails, including myself. It's great because you can just pour it and it's kind of, you know, you feel like you've got something a little bit more enhanced, and it's good to go as well. But yeah, it's pretty delicious. And now we're getting into fall and winter, which seems even a more appropriate time for maple syrup. And yeah, innovation, right? Yeah, like innovation, experimentation, and you know, always trying to figure out what's the next thing to do, right? Yeah. Always being true to the whiskey.
I
And I
love that.
see,
We have a couple of questions from Facebook. Steve Bayshore wants to know, I have to correct myself, how do you compare the soils of Kentucky versus PA versus New York, and how does that impact the grains and the flavor?
oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. Because they're all used in a similar fashion. I mean, the where our grains are grown, the climate is different, but the soils themselves, you know, are managed pretty much the same way with, you know, the crop, you know, basic crop rotation and that sort of thing. Yeah, everything is about terroir. There are people that argue there's no terroir in whiskey. Though all of those factors factor into what the final product's going to taste like. Everything from the day that it's planted to how that corn is handled, how that corn is stored, how those grains are stored, you know, the other supporting grains, how they're malted, how they're stored, how they're handled. You know, is the quality kept up there? Do they have the influence of their environment? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there a little bit of hint of barnyard in some of it? Sometimes there is. If it's, you know, the right amount, it's going to enhance it. If it's not the right amount, it gets rejected. But so everything, every step of the way, it's, you know, it's not unlike giving somebody a chicken soup recipe and saying, okay, here's my secret recipe. And it's never going to be exactly the same. The heat source might be different. The pot that you use might be a different size. The chickens may not come from the same place. The vegetables may be cut up at different sizes. So no matter what, it's almost, you know, you put your own signature on your whiskey and your product, whether you're sourcing and blending it and finishing it in your facility, or you're laying down your own juice and aging it in your facility or in another person's facility. It all impacts the flavor, all of it. There's so many places to go right and lots of places to go wrong. And, you know, you're always working that balancing game, and we end up, you know, with a beautiful product in the end. But there's lots of quality considerations to think about as through the entire process. But yeah, the flavor. Yeah, it sometimes, you know, tastes like its surroundings, and I think we've all experienced that too. You know, those of us that have been fortunate enough to be in some of the rick houses, and you're tasting the whiskey in the rick house, but then you're also surrounded, you know, the project at Mount Vernon is a perfect example of that, because there's a little bit of smoke sometimes in the flavor notes there, but there's no smoked or malted grains in there at all. It's all just from the environment and the open wood fires there as well. Yeah. And new distillate is a sponge. I mean, you have to be even careful, you know, about it coming off the still in the right environment, because it's a sponge. So you think, okay, it's got all this strong flavor and this high alcohol, but it's enhanced by its environment before it's even barreled. You add our, here we add our mine water to cut it, and we're barreling anywhere between 110 and 115. We're doing a little bit of a proof experimentation. I like to barrel a little bit lower, but we discovered we're losing proof here. So we've knocked it up just a couple notches to see how that's going to work out. And so even the barrel entry proof is going to influence the final whiskey product.
Awesome. And he had a follow-up as well, and to kind of steer it back to water, is the water in the mine in New York comparable to Kentucky or Tennessee waters?
They are, but they're not the same. They're not the same. It's interesting. We're so much heavier on magnesium and calcium. The numbers are higher. There's magnesium and calcium in those waters, but the parts per million are substantially higher. Don't ask me for the number. I can't remember off the top of my head. But when I was laying them side by side, I had about 3 different sources out of Kentucky, and I haven't done any out of Pennsylvania. So to be quite frank, I haven't done that, but I have put it up against Kentucky water, and we're a lot heavier on the mineral content per, like I said, on the parts per million as well. Yeah, it's crisp. It's good. Yeah, it's great water. So. Oh, and I see Chris's question. Have you tried different water, and what were the main differences you could see? The main difference is this change in flavor. Not that if you're proofing down with distilled water, it actually can be really delicious, but it won't pop, you know, like I said, the notes won't be the same in it side by side. It'll enhance different notes. And so in our case, you know, it's critical that we, you know, make Widow Jane, and that we need that water to keep our flavor profile. Even though there's going to be differences from batch to batch, how all of them are going to taste, the base notes are all going to be enhanced by our lovely wine water as well. We have another question? No, I'm sorry, I'm trying to monitor the questions. And
no, we don't have any at the moment. Steve Bayshore just says he's blending flat mineral water, so he'll need the parts per million. But I think he's just pulling your chain.
Okay. Yes.
But other than that, yeah, we're question free at the moment.
Yeah, Mary, when you're out in the field, do you get these sorts of questions or?
Oh, for sure about the water. People are always really interested in what in the water makes it so different. What are the particular minerals? So always they're interested in what the magnesium and the thing and how and what minerals maybe we're not looking for. So maybe that would be a good thing to chat with folks about is some things that you need to avoid when you're have this kind of really beautiful natural water. Are there any ones that don't do well with whiskey?
Iron is the one you really want to avoid. You also want to avoid anything that's you know, if you're using, that's the reason people use distilled water, correct, or reverse osmosis. So they're stripping absolutely everything out of it. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that there's still some trace chlorine or something in a water that would not come out of the, you know, the mine, but, you know, of water that wasn't properly handled to clean up, or somebody trying to take a shortcut, and oh my gosh, it can just devastate. You know, it's interesting because people, you know, that's something I'm a little bit of an ice snob because even the ice sometimes that's been made in your, you know, your automatic ice maker in your freezer is still going through a line. If your filter is not clean, if there's a little bit of mold, a little bit of mildew, if your filter is failing, you know, you might have a little bit of chlorine come through that and go into your ice maker, and you can tell in a half a second that somebody has put ice in that is got a little bit of chlorine in it. You can't always tell if it's got mold or mildew in it, but it will, you know, obviously influence the taste of your whiskey. So one of the things I encourage people to do is, you know, either keep a filtration pitcher to make your ice in standard ice cubes and stick it in your freezer and make sure that it's covered so that it doesn't pick up all the freezer odors, because you can ruin a good whiskey. There's nothing wrong with dropping a little bit of ice or putting a little bit of water in it, but you've got to be cautious. You know, if you're going to drop a proof, even, you know, like, okay, so we've taken all this care, and the last thing, you know, for somebody to put a moldy chlorinated ice cube in it, you know, they're not going to understand, they're not going to get the full experience of a great whiskey if they're tainting it up front. So, you know, I'm not a snob about much, but I am an ice snob. Sometimes when I see pictures on social media, and I can see these cloudy, dark ice cubes, and everybody has access, you know, especially like the silicone ice molds. You know, I highly encourage people to keep those clean and use some sort of filtered water or distilled water in that as well, because it will influence your whiskey. You know, you get a tired, old, stale, freezer burnt ice cube in there, it's gonna, you know, it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be good. You know, you get your ice cubes done. If you need to put them into, you know, pop them into a Ziploc bag or something to keep from tainting your whiskey, you know, it's just a very little effort to keep these gorgeous whiskeys gorgeous. I met an ice snob the other day that's more of an ice snob than I am, and he and I went on at length about you know, dropping you know, the other thing too is always making sure your glass is clear, you know, making sure all the dishwasher soap has been rinsed from it and everything, because all this gorgeous whiskey and all this gorgeous water, it's, you know, like I said, it's influenced to the very end. oh, Chris has asked me, does the water change with each corn tour? I don't have this like science evidence of that, but I have to say yes. Just because everything is so influenced by its surroundings environmentally, that if somebody wants to argue that with me, I'll start to do some more in-depth research with that as well. But yeah, everything, trying to get from grain to glass. We hear that phrase a lot. There's so many things that we can do to influence that, and whether it's a cooking protocol that's a shift in temperature or a shift in hold time, or how we handle that one particular corn varietal or those other grain additions. There's just room for influence the entire step, every step of the way. And I think I might be done for today. I love for questions. If somebody needs to reach out to me to ask me something that wasn't making any sense, or they want something a little bit more in depth, you can reach me at lisa@widowjane.com. Sometimes a little slow to answer the email, but I will get it answered. And yeah, bring on the questions, because it makes me a better distiller, it makes me a better blender, and forces me to a place where I actually have to study and learn the answer sometimes. So yeah. Take care, everybody. Stay well, and cheers.